Okay, Chris, could you do the roll call, please?
Chair Dew,
Here.
Vice Chair Furlong,
Here.
Member Matthews,
Here.
Member Shifsky,
Here.
Member Thorson, Council Representative Cole, absent, Mayor Mungy,
Here.
and for staff and ex officio members present today are Executive Director Frandl, Treasurer Community Development Director Howe, EDA Secretary Cherney. Absent today is Business Association Representative Gary.
Okay, thank you. We have the agenda was sent to everyone, and the agenda is in front of you. Do we have any proposed modifications? If we have none, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Furlong, second by Shifsky. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay, motion carries. The agenda is adopted. The minutes from the April 11th, 2023 EDA meeting, again, we're in your packet. I'll entertain any modifications or discussion on those minutes. Otherwise, look for a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Minutes are approved. Okay, we have a couple, or we have a recognition item here. I'll say a few words, and then I think I will ask a couple others to say a few words as well. So today we're going to recognize Don Jensen for his time on EDA and all of his efforts towards the city. I'm not sure exactly how long Don was part of the EDA. It seemed like 10 years, 5, 6, 7, 7-ish. Yes.
4 years.
Oh. We'll correct the plaque. It says 4, but it felt like 10. So, I for one, we've been here for a long time together, and I certainly appreciate all your contributions and valuable input and insights from your personal business experience and your personal time in town. And having folks like Don is just invaluable to groups like this, and extremely valuable to the EDA, and I appreciate our friendship that grew out of this, and glad to have the time with you, and hope to have some more time to do some other things. So. Oh, it's fine. So I'm gonna kind of open the mic to. I'm gonna start with Terry Furlong, who was here for much of the tenure. If you'd like to say a few words.
Well, Don, our friendship goes a long way, deep, and when I had asked you to be on the EDA, you didn't hesitate, and you jumped right in and helped through pandemic and civil unrest and all the development that was going on downtown, and you're really instrumental in helping us get through all that. I look forward to more years, and I know your favorite word right now is what? Shit? Is shit? That's kind of an inside joke right now. But I truly, as a dear friend, appreciate all you've done in the last 4 years being on the EDA.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Well, you started a year before I did, yep. And I came on board. You were wonderful to work with, knowledgeable, and you always smiled and laughed. And that's one thing that was number one in my book. So thanks, Don.
Okay, we have a presentation to do. Present you with a plaque for your service.
Stay right there, bud. You're good. Do you mind if we all come down there, John? Yeah. Let's all go.
so much for all the years on the EDA and your family and everything you've done for North St. Paul. You're a credit to our community, and God bless you, and we're all praying for you, and we appreciate everything.
Yet one time.
Well, you did it.
Oh,
You appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Yes, and I'll give it, here you go.
Oh, we got more stuff.
Here you go. More stuff, oh yeah, we're not done yet, brother. This shoe is a very heavy weight. Of North St. Paul. It's not a bobber.
Okay, okay,
So you can put
Good.
that on your desk proudly.
okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
We're gonna do a shot with everybody. Why don't we have the whole EDA and everybody come back?
Yep, yep.
We'll come to you. Yeah.
Okay.
You're a big part of it.
Yeah, she's Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Okay. We got a lot. What? Well, I'm not going, I wouldn't. No, but what I was gonna say, I would be, all the time, I would be a lot, yeah. Yep. Sorry.
No,
Okay,
thank you for coming in.
okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have a concept proposal for Margaret Street, and with us today, we have John Dobbs and Gary Mulcahy. I'm not, John, are you speaking? We'll get to Gary later.
The new kid on the block.
Perfect. So welcome.
Thank you. Is this connected somehow? I plugged in, so I don't know. I plugged into the HDMI here.
There we are. Perfect.
So my name's John Dobbs, and I work for Gary. I haven't done an awful lot of commercial stuff in my career, but I've been doing land development since '92, so I'm kind of more of a residential person historically. My background is I have a degree in landscape architecture and a master's from St. Thomas in development, so real estate development. But anyway, Gary and I met through a mutual friend, and I'm actually really excited about this. I was, I think in your report, the Chanhassen report from the Autoplex out there, I was actually kind of around when that one was first going in, and the planner, a senior planner over at Chanhassen, which I hadn't seen in 25 years, I went over and chatted with him and got the staff report. My hair was blonde, and he was about 40 pounds lighter the last time we saw each other, so there you go. I'll make this kind of brief. As you guys know, Gary owns the building right here on Helen, 2350, and then obviously the city lots along the way. So the concept kind of incorporates both private and city property. Site details is the approximate site is about 1.72 acres or 74,827 square feet. The city owns about 40,000 of that. I just pulled that off the county plat map, so if it's not 100% accurate, I apologize. Gary's land is 33,992. The proposed building in the concept is about 28,000 square feet under roof in two different buildings. And so this is a concept of what the garage condo project can look like. So I don't know, I did go over and chat with the administrator of History Cruises, who's over on 6th Street, Bruce, I think his name was. We chatted for a while, and I sat in his garage, and he offered me a beer. I actually didn't know him personally, but I am, and used to have a car. I had a 1970 LS6 Chevelle. Back when I bought mine in 2002, about a $60,000 automobile. Today, that car is worth about 125 grand. When you bought them in the 70s, they were like 3,200 bucks off the line, right? And Bruce tells me that about 1,200 people come and go with their cars out there. So if you start adding up the revenue of people's toys, they're not toys anymore, and pretty expensive. And so out of that has grown the need for, in a lot of places, so Egan has one called the Egan Car Garages, Egan Car Garages. Anyway, and then some of them are just straight up Autoplex or garage condos, and they have a variety of different rules or names about them. So this is a concept we put together. The main building, the big building, which would front Margaret Street. Margaret Street would be on your right as you look at this, is a double-sided building, and then the single building, which backs up to the school, would be single-loaded or garages on one side in the center down the alley. And so when I tried to figure out what we could connect to and how this whole thing would work, and really where the idea came from was the car show. When I went out and talked to Chanhassen, one of the things they ran into very early on when they did the project was it's out in kind of an industrial area that's not too far from the Hazeltine Golf Course. It was not set up to have big events. And so one of the things they really struggled with was all these people bought all these garages, then all these very expensive automobiles came in. They started to have open houses, and 1,000 people would show up and overwhelm that part of the city. They didn't have parking for it. They didn't have any of that. But everybody likes to come look at Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and nowadays Chevelles and Plymouths and Cudas and all of that. And so we were thinking, and one of the early things I did was talk to the car show folks, and he actually said he knew a couple people who might be interested in buying one. And so the idea was if we could do this condo garage project, we could begin to pull all of that traffic that happens on Friday night and spills over into the weekends at times, not only up and down 7th, but pull it a little bit off of Main Drag and begin to pull it into the city a little bit. And the other one was from your one of the long-range plans, and I'm sorry, Robert would probably know which one. It actually shows on it, which is the graphic on the left, a little green node at the end, which is kind of a connection point, I think, for or what we're trying to do is just a pedestrian connection point to try to work forward. So this is the first connection of the site to the bigger neighborhood of the city of downtown North St. Paul. So the cars are over on 7th, the yellow is 7th, and then the graphic of our site. So to just try to pull people over to Sepulveda and up Margaret a little bit. And the other one is just the pedestrian. On the very end of our site plan, we are going to leave that in green space. And so there's a series of kind of pedestrian nodes scattered around the city in both little parks and public open spaces. And this would also give people a place to add to the list so they could, you know, set up a picnic blanket or whatever down on the south end. And on the weekends, everybody's in their garage anyway, working on their stuff. So this would maybe bring some activity, or will bring some activity in. Even though I've been talking a lot about it being a condo, a car garage condo project, they actually end up being used for a lot of different small business reasons. Simulators. I heard somebody say at one point they maybe thought about a golf simulator. One of the drawings I saw is the one in the upper left, my upper left-hand corner, yours as well. Looks to me like somebody had actually created kind of a maybe a small business conference area where they could actually do off-site things for their business and come in. And obviously a lot of car garages, which are, you know, everything from the old school Woody hot rod in the upper right to just you know, the Corvette collection, which being a car guy, that's, depending on if they're all original, the Corvettes in the middle is probably $500,000 worth of cars sitting there. The other thing about the project as a whole and most of these projects is they actually can actually be 14 or 16 foot or 18 foot or even 24 foot or bigger. They're modular in design, so depending on what the user is and what the buyer is, or the lessor, depending on which way Gary chooses to go with it, the space can be somewhat modular. So they aren't all 14 feet by 48 feet. Some of them are 14 feet, and in the big buildings case, could be 80 feet deep, and everything in between. Most of the square footages I have seen when I've done my research is 675 to about 1,300 square feet of floor space. And a lot of them do end up putting little mezzanine areas in the back of it, as you can kind of see with the Corvette site in the middle. So this is kind of the final site plan, and the concept at the bottom was actually done by the landscape architects. I'm sorry, I forget their name. They did the plan for the city of North St. Paul in 2012. I used to be able to remember names when I had blonde hair and I was younger, but now as I'm getting older. Anyway,
think it was,
they're awesome, did a
NAI.
beautiful job. And then this is a site plan that was done by the architect. And one of the original things that was kind of thrown out there, and it's on this plan, I apologize, it actually isn't supposed to be, was a little coffee stand down in the corner where the green space will be. There's not a coffee stand there, so disregard that. But that would be where the green space is, that kind of triangle leftover spot at the bottom. And so that's the site plan. And we are excited to try to do this. We think there's a real market for it. Just kicking the tires, we've got 3 or 4 or 5 people, depending on how you want to count it, family members and friends who are already interested in buying them. There's probably, if the average one is 14 to 16 feet wide, there's probably 35 to 40 of these after it's all said and done, depending on how this big building lays out. But I think that's about as far as the research as I've gone. We just try to put a concept together, and we're here to answer any questions. I'll do the best I can to answer them, and we would very much like to take the next steps and figure out how to do a more detailed proposal, but we just wanted to see if this was something the city had an appetite in before we started to go down the architecture and civil engineering and landscape architecture trail, which gets spendy before too long.
Okay, thanks, John. Well, if you want to stand for questions here. In the packet, one of the things that John had sent over in advance, I provided to staff, and it looks like they've extracted some potential questions and thoughts out of that. Is that what occurred here?
Well, the staff report that was provided by the Chanhassen staff was really specific to a conditional use permit, and it wasn't particularly relevant to us at this stage.
Okay.
So as you consider it, yeah, please go ahead and think about, in general, how consistent is this project with our comprehensive plan, our redevelopment master plan, the downtown design guidelines, and is it primarily for this group? Will it advance our economic development goals for the city? And then also, will there be any requests for incentives for this project? That's important for us to know too as we move forward.
Do we know the answer on requests for incentives? Jump right to the. I'm assuming we don't know the answer about any incentive requests from the development at this juncture. There's no pro forma or anything prepared. Okay. Safe assumption you want that to. Safe assumption you'd want to obtain the city parcels at a reasonable rate. Is that okay? So beyond, I don't know if my mic's working. By the way, it is okay. There are a number of other questions in there, but I'll kind of open it to the table for any questions, either coming off staff report or any other questions that anyone might have regarding the facility.
As far as like the Chanhassen and other ones, is there no staying overnight? Is that kind of the rules? Like you're going to follow the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's industrial, commercial. It would not be residential on any level, so yes.
Okay.
And I believe your code prohibits that kind of use for an overnight commercial. Is that not true?
I think
That's not our intent.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely. Condominium docs will say that.
our redevelopment master plan and our zoning ordinance have both been amended in the past, I don't know, since 2015. The zoning was changed, and then the redevelopment master plan was updated last year. So things are a little bit different than what you may remember working with in the past.
But the intent is no overnight stays.
And
Okay.
it'll be in the association documents for the condominium project.
Other thoughts, comments, questions?
I'm new to this. This is brand new to me. I've never seen one. I haven't been out to Chanhassen. Is there anybody else around us that have these? Is there,
Yeah, so actually the two that are probably the most comparable is Cottage Grove has one, as does Egan. The one out in Chanhassen, and then there's another one in Medina, are both really high-end. And what I mean by that is they were kind of you talk about overnight and live, I mean, these places are huge, and they look like big residential, kind of, the residential roof and all of that. The one in Egan and the one in Cottage Grove, which are the ones I'm most familiar with, are built and designed more like industrial buildings, in essence. So some of them have different kinds of architecture on the outside. But they really are geared for that. They look more like that. So the one in Cottage Grove, I think, is maybe 80 units, something like that. The one in Egan, it took them the first phase was done in 2012, but that was the wrong time to start this kind of a project. The last two buildings they put in, which are similar in size to what we're proposing here, were done in 2020, 2021, and were sold out pretty fast. Concrete, I believe they were concrete, maybe a FabCon type building with large commercial doors on the front. 14-foot tall doors.
one of my concerns would be what it looks like on our main, on the street out there, the street state. You know, is it gonna look like a garage, or is it gonna look like, I don't know. Like I said, this is new to me. I have no idea what.
Yeah, John and I had an opportunity to talk, and I think I conveyed, hopefully clearly, that, the architecture being directly across from City Hall will be of some concern. That doesn't necessarily say it has to be X, Y, or Z, but it's going to have to be appropriate, I would think, to get through, planning and council ultimately on this. So, we would encourage,
And we've tried to be, even in the initial concepts, without really getting too far in the architecture, as you can see from the drawing I have up, we tried to give it a different feel or flair than just a flat industrial building.
And then are there covenants for what can be put in there?
It'll be a condominium project, so it'll have a condominium association, and then there will be rules about, sharing common costs and all that kind of thing. Do you have a specific concern?
Well, I just think if you don't have a car, you would turn it into a storage unit. Could it be turned into just storage and not used as a?
Yeah, I theoretically, I guess that's true. For the cost of building buildings like this, and by default, the individual unit cost, to follow, be a pretty expensive place to just use for storage, but I guess, yes, there could be some of that.
I've been out to the Medina site. It's fantastic, and it filled up pretty remarkably quickly. They are top-notch looking units, and as far as concerns about what would these look like, all you have to do is walk around this city and look at what Mr. Mulcahy has constructed over the years. They've always been top-notch construction, something that we can be proud of in our town, and I have no doubts that this will be the same. And it gives the city of North St. Paul an opportunity to be kind of on, leading the way rather than, following up. So there's another site out in Holton, Wisconsin, right over the border. It's very similar.
Oh, okay. Yep, and I think there's also one in Big Lake. A friend of mine actually did some of the work in the one in Egan originally, and he's now doing some of the work up in Big Lake. They're beginning to pop up. Especially as real estate, so, as a residential developer, I see a lot of that. As real estate lots and buildings become smaller and smaller because of cost and the cost to do residential development, having space for your stuff is getting harder and harder to find. And so I actually think that this is going to continue and to grow. And the point I was making about the Chanhassen one and how they put it in a spot where they couldn't have a lot of traffic, we're doing the reverse. We're actually trying to attach to a spot that already has all of the traffic on Friday nights and is a pretty popular thing, I think, right? It's a ton of fun to be out here on Friday nights. I guess I haven't seen it from your seat. But yeah, they one of the things I do is probably sit out there on Friday night with a booth and sell them, lease them, whatever. There's just a ton of activity. So we think this enhances that.
How much land, can you go back to that? How much land does Mr. Mulcahy own, and how much is he getting from the city? What's that split? Or trying to buy from the city? Site, yeah,
This is,
full.
as I said, off of the
Yep.
plat maps that I could pull. The approximate site is 74,800 square feet. The city owns a little bit more than half of that at 40,000, so just under an acre, 41,000. And then Gary owns about 34,000 of it, so about 3/4 of an acre.
I like, it's another thing where it's using land that's probably not going to be used unless it was something like this, a partnership between a person that's been with the city and owns buildings in the city and lots we have open. So I do like that it's able
One of the other
to come together as a group.
And that's a great point, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention, one of the other things is that, so the building off of Howland 2350, is that right? Has a huge parking lot that on Friday night is always full with people going to the car show. But because Gary owns the land and the parking lot, we can actually use it as a cross easement. So we actually have a built-in parking lot right next to this too. So even though the site itself and Gary's land that we're proposing being cut up is only 34,000 plus or minus square feet, the parking lot is also a huge asset that we'd have a cross easement on, and it's already there.
In looking at this, I believe there's a significant utility easement that runs north-south, and is that the drive between the two buildings? Is that the concept?
So there's a storm sewer easement that goes right down in between the two buildings.
Okay.
And then, is that the easement that you're referring to? Or you?
Correct, yep.
Yep. So we've cited, that's why the one building is narrow and the other building is wider, we're trying to land the easement right in between the two buildings.
Got it. And I think that represents a significant hurdle to many developments. What happens with that easement and how it's handled.
It's a large pipe, I understand. Somebody I know has been in it, and it's large.
In my younger years.
Like as tall as me, I guess. It's quite the pipe, I guess.
It runs behind all the buildings that are on Margaret Street there.
Does it?
Building that I own, there's a building next door to that my son owns, Bigley Auto owns, it goes right behind those buildings. And it's a storm sewer,
Right up to the north behind, yep.
to the west,
Yep.
right behind, yep. Don't need to move it. Doesn't look like you have to.
What's that? There is, okay.
Did you say there is going to be a coffee shop?
No, I'm sorry, that was my fault in the beginning. I just kind of threw some ideas together, and this is a drawing I grabbed for the slide incorrectly, so apologize.
No green space.
There'll be green space at the bottom, and there won't be a coffee shop. And that's the pedestrian, that's like the pedestrian area, the green space pedestrian area I'm trying to connect to, so maybe a place for people to pause and rest if they're walking around. And back to the plan, which I heard you say maybe has been updated. But this little green spot down on the bottom, so City Hall's the big blue star, and then there was a little green spot that was there, or is there. And so we're just gonna keep that going as a pedestrian node.
I also been to the one in Chanhassen, and they're beautiful when they had cars and coffee over there. And when it comes to you know, we get older, we get more money, but sometimes our health, so we can't have the big 3-car garage to houses anymore. We need to get into maybe a single level or a townhouse, but we still want our toys. So that's the kind of the demographic I see is people that have that spare car that need to have a spot for it and be a little hobby shop and maybe not be underneath the wife's coattails all day.
Well, and I wish I'd held on to the stuff that I had when I was younger, because, boy, if you had a car when you were, in the 80s that was, you can buy a Ferrari for 50 grand, it's worth $2 million nowadays. It's crazy what this stuff. And so when you got a vehicle, and that was kind of the concern I had with mine, I mean, it got to the point where mine was worth almost $100,000, and I wanted to drive it, but I was concerned about driving it, and I didn't really have a great place to put it, and there's a lot of people, I mean, just the picture that's in the plan, the hot rod, there's a Pontiac 442. Some of these things are just worth crazy money. And to have a safe, secure place that's near home, and there really isn't one of these projects near this quadrant. And there's a lot of car guys around, and girls, and people like that. So maybe some golf enthusiasts and other small business owners. The nice thing about the idea is because it's somewhat modular and it's secure and it's in a great location and in a central place, there's a lot of different uses that people could come up with to do it. I mean, you're downtown North St. Paul, you can eat here, you can visit here, weekends, nights, whatever, and there's just a lot going on as opposed to one that's out in the suburbs where you're driving to it, that's where you are, and then when you want anything, you have to leave. You don't have to do that here.
Joe, anything to add, or?
I think, as I mentioned when we talked about this idea a couple months ago, I think it's absolutely thinking outside the box with such a great, unique idea bringing to North St. Paul. I think there is a market to this. I think it can be utilized in a bunch of different ways from people purchasing it. I do absolutely see a pretty big benefit of doing something like this.
Yeah, I agree. I think, to address just a couple of items, I don't know that I could speak to the comp plan, nor that it would drill down to that level in that spot. But the redevelopment master plan certainly does, and this falls in the area of what we call our downtown core. That particular area is labeled as a transition area, which, as I understand it, and one of the authors of this is sitting right over there, so I might let her speak to it. But I understand the transition area is to, where we have kind of the living street model along 7th, retail that we're transitioning into, other uses, could be multifamily, could be businesses, could be, in this case, also municipal services. So it's in that zone that I think something like this is quite appropriate for. In terms of the zoning itself, it's within MU1, which has a pretty broad spectrum of permitted uses. So I don't know that I can't speak for planning, but I don't know that we'd hit a ton of hurdles in that regard. Brandy, any comments on that front?
Conceptually, I think that it probably, the concept doesn't exist in zoning in most cities, but I think that they're condominiums, commercial type projects, industrial type projects are all located within our downtown area. I don't think that it doesn't necessarily fit. I just think it would take some analysis in order to provide a definitive answer to the zoning question. The transition zone, in terms of the redevelopment master plan, it is intended to continue the traditional type uses that you see in the downtown, with the ability to also increase the density by allowing taller structures that are outside of that immediate. The streets would be, I think, Helen to maybe Charles is like the 2 to 3 story, and then you kind of get into the transition zone and you go taller. So that's one potential opportunity that we wouldn't have with a shorter building. But in general, I think, we need more information to do a proper analysis, but I think it's definitely a possibility based on our two plans and the zoning.
Yeah, I believe that, my own opinion, I am familiar with all the facilities you've talked about. You know, these are sprouting up, kind of in and around the metro and in the burbs. You know, you guys mentioned Hudson and what's that other joint? Holton, yeah, Holton. I know I think there's one down in Somerset. So they're sprouting up for sure, and everything that I've heard, and this is mostly anecdotally, but these things hit the market and they're gone. I mean, they get snapped up. There's just there's not enough of them. I think that if properly set up, they can contribute to the downtown environment in a really good way. I'd be hard to argue that it's not a good match with. We have a car show themed town almost, so it's hard to argue that it's not a good match for that. I do think that some of the challenges that will be faced are, we've already mentioned it, I think architecture, and I assume that, kind of what you showed us is maybe a little plain on purpose. I don't know that, but, I don't know that it needs to be, gilded and, or all brick or anything like that, but there'll be a lot of questions, I'm sure, surrounding architecture, and trying to make it fit, if you will. I would think, at least from what I've heard, that operationally, what does it look like operationally? What are the guardrails for what goes on there is going to be important, I think, is what I'm hearing. And so it's probably worthy of, playing that out a little bit to understand, not only what you want the guardrails to be, but, how does that fit into the viewpoint of planning and council? And so likely a little work to be done there to run that up the flagpole, if you will, and see what the concerns are. Brandy, I'll look to you for maybe guidance, but where my thought process is on this is maybe to direct their team to work with staff to maybe come up with a pick list of high-level items that we should try to define a little better than we have currently defined. And to me, it feels like something that would highly warrant some sort of solicitation of public input, to understand what all the concerns might be. Mind you, with that, you're going to get people that say no way, no how. You're going to get people that love it. But the key to that, I think it will help staff, council, planning to be able to say, look, we've kind of run this by the community. Community loves it. They just want to make sure that there's no beer keg parties there in the middle of the day and people aren't sleeping overnight there and that kind of business. Whatever the concerns are. And then at that point, I think we could probably get pretty good feedback in terms of where this would land, ultimately with council, and at the kind of open forum, the public solicitation piece. Typically, we'd want to try to get some people from planning involved for their potential comments and concerns at that time. I think that would be a good next step because then that would, I think, position your group to know if we do X, Y, and Z, we're in pretty good stead and we're willing to spend money to go to the next stage and start building a pro forma and start figuring out what it looks like. And then when you get to that stage, then we can have the conversations about conveyance of the property and what have you. I don't know that it might sound like a lot, but to me, that's not a protracted exercise. I think that's something that can get through, relatively quickly. I don't know if these public forum, I am calling it a public forum, but
Yeah.
what do we call it? Is that the right term? Or
I think so. I think what you're asking for is just an opportunity for the presentation that we just received here to be done in a more public way. So just public outreach meeting, put it out there for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, very similar.
It would be here, most likely. We would advertise it for you. You would come in and do a presentation and answer questions. Yeah.
Yeah, we did that with the folks that are working on the Lilly development. Had a meeting. They got great feedback. Did a few tweaks to their plan. Neighborhood was, and it actually created some excitement as well at the same time. And it would likely do the same for you.
Meetings, when you're doing residential neighborhoods and turning people's backyards from farm fields into neighborhoods, this one will be really calm compared to that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah, Gary will be the only neighbor that.
I'm gonna bring him with a Target shirt, and I'm gonna be sick that day. But no, totally.
I think that would be extremely helpful to, because then I think coming out of that, how do we get visibility to planning on this, if any? Can we?
Well, I think we might want to start with City Council doing a similar concept presentation to them. I mean, they're ultimately going to be the decision maker. Planning is going to come in when it comes to is the zoning going to be appropriate for this site? How do we apply parking standards, for example, which I think we've got covered, and the design standards. The use, I think, it's not a listed land use, but right.
We could pick, well, neither is Cat Hotel.
Exactly. So I think the next step, because we are talking about city-owned property.
We approve that. Sorry.
Okay, Cat Hotel. Because we are dealing with city-owned property, I think sooner rather than later we should get the concept presentation to that body, and then maybe follow that. Once they give us a go-ahead to continue to explore, then we bring in the public.
Since you're the only council member here, thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I definitely think it'd be good to get in front of everybody.
Well, can staff work with John and get a date on that and do council, and then next step sounds like some sort of public forum, and then at that point I think that should tell us where this thing lands and a little more about how people's feelings on, again, what it looks like, how it operates. I would encourage to maybe think about a little more about the operation of it. At least the perceived do's and don'ts from your perspective. I think that would be helpful at council to say, here's what we think will happen. We might have big parties on the weekend for the residents that are there. When I say parties, I know that they have community gatherings for all the residents of the condos. Or you will do that or you won't do that, or they'll be open to the public, or hit the key things. Nobody's going to be permitted to sleep there, et cetera, et cetera. I think if you have a few more of those type things defined, at least from your perspective with council, that would be extremely helpful. And then at some point, if everybody's comfortable after that process, then it's up to you guys if you're going to spend the money to take the next steps, and then probably back here to talk about the land. Is that right? That can be worked out with staff too.
Yeah, well, when we get to the point where we're ready to have that conversation, it'll have to be better defined.
I don't, I would say from the EDA's perspective, and please correct if I'm wrong, it sounds like we're generally supportive of the idea. There's a lot of questions, but is that a fair statement? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got some questions that are going to have to be answered at some point along the line. I think you guys are well aware of that, but I think we're generally supportive of it and think it would be a great thing. So, where we sit, city manager, I miss anything?
I would just echo the architecture. We have had other potential projects over there that have been pushed back a couple of times due to the architecture of it. A lot of time, effort, and planning went into this building and making it look as nice as it is. So we wouldn't want to just see a tin garage out there. Something that speaks to the area and takes into consideration this building as well, of its architecture and its makeup.
Yeah, and I respect and completely understand that. When Gary first asked me if I'd be interested in trying to do some background work on this, that was one of his first comments as well. He's been here longer than I've been alive. Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. And to answer your question directly, I didn't want to get too far into the weeds on the architecture. Last year, the supply chain stuff that we went through in the industry was pretty scary. And we just haven't gotten that far yet, and things got pretty out of whack for cost-wise. So, yeah, purposefully kind of kept it a little bit bland at this point. But and then I actually have a lot of the answers on how it would actually function on some level. City of Chanhassen was actually very helpful about that because they still have events now, but they have a vehicle inside the system, their system, on how to do bigger events versus just people hanging out in their garages and things like that. So yes, I can absolutely put that down and get it more cleaned up.
And I do think with council and with the public deal too, one thing that we've seen work is developers that come in with kind of three, maybe 2, 3, 4 versions of what they like and would be happy with it. They don't have to be final, but good concept elevations. And what winds up happening is everybody gets a consensus and says, yeah, we really like that with maybe a little bit of this on it. And then you're down a path and you don't have to, go through a bunch of gyrations trying to get to an end, so. Okay, well, good. Anything else from us at this point? I think.
Thank you very much for your time and your feedback. It's very helpful.
Good.
And yeah, I'm excited to do this, and we'll get to work.
Okay, and John, do you have contact info?
I can be in touch with you through Mr. Mulcahy. Thank you.
I'll get you my card in a second.
Anything else to add, Brandy, before we wrap that up?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I'll just do a little bit of research on my end and reach out to you with some next steps and process how we anticipate this rolling out. Okay.
Okay, thanks very much, John. Thank you, Gary. Hey, Gary, don't talk so much next time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, meeting open to the public. I don't see anybody in the room, or are we online? Nobody online that, nobody online, perfect. Okay, EDA discussion and action items. Update on River of God Church and Reflex Medical Site. Brandy?
Yeah, I think we reported at the last meeting about our meeting that we had with Reflex, and also I was directed to contact DSGW to get a proposal for analysis of the needs of River of God. If they were to relocate, we need to understand how big of space they need and what kind of space. So I was able to secure that proposal. It's in the packet. And then I had a subsequent meeting with Pastor Denny, which was a fairly good meeting. We talked about, some of the goals of the church, and then I kind of left it in his hands to take it back to the congregation to determine if they would be willing to allow us to enter their property to do this study. And he last week gave me a text message saying that they would prefer to not do that at this time. I think they're just a little hesitant.
Hesitant to do the study or hesitant to
He didn't really give.
think about moving or?
Yeah, he didn't give me a direct response as to why they were not willing to do the study. I just sense hesitation on. I think this is a transition that if and when it happens, they're going to require to go in some pretty small steps to get them to the ready point.
Okay. Well, we're not in the business of kicking people out of town. That's not our job, or that'd be out of our lane. We are in the business of attracting and retaining businesses, and we know that Reflex has a stated need, not just desire, but a stated need to expand. And so I'm not sure what we do at this point, other than I do think that we at least owe an answer back to Reflex that this is where the current answer we have from the church, we're not sure what it means. And I guess take a look at other opportunities or other things that may work. Not sure.
So when we had met with Reflex he had some ideas too of what the church could potentially locate to. And I don't know if Denny knows those options.
I think that, I don't know if any specifics were conveyed to the church.
Well, there was the conversation of the church could potentially, if they were to build up, the church could be located within the same footprint of Reflex Medical. He didn't seem keen on that idea, given the fact that their congregation is older and they'd have to have an elevator put in the system. So I don't know if that's a reality or not, whether they can, pursue that
It's hard
option.
to, yeah, it's hard to address if we don't even know what the actual need is.
Yep.
And so, a little disappointing that the church, I thought we were on a path with them to at least explore that, and, with the understanding that nobody's asking anybody to do anything at this point, but
Right.
let's understand, what the need is so we could explore what's possible, but.
Maybe schedule another meeting with them just to see with the church as small meeting and
Well,
find out what.
Was it a leave it alone text, or leave us alone text, or was it we don't want to?
It's a confusing situation because the conversation that I had with him was very positive. And then when he brought it to the rest and then responded their wishes to me via text message, it was, it felt like we're pumping the brakes a little bit.
I know you guys weren't involved in this directly, or Terry and I were, but any thoughts, comments?
I'm wondering if there's any other opportunities for expanding their their footprint without going in the direction of the church. There's like a triangular shaped parcel just to the south of them that has a single family house. Sorry? Do you?
He's even worse to deal with.
Oh,
Is that a? Oh, yeah, that one. I think you were referring to the parcel to the north, or the south, excuse me.
yeah, to the south behind the alley.
Right. It looks like a retention pond to me, but,
Well, no, not that one, but
Oh.
you're right, that is a retention pond. But if you're looking north of 3rd Avenue, west of Helen Street, there's a single-family house and I think an apartment building.
well, I think, I don't know, I think the only answer here is that we need to, I do think attempting to understand where the church sits in terms of, does your message mean you don't want to engage at all, you don't want to engage at this time, go away, leave us alone? We're not sure we don't want to pester them, but it'd be good to gain some clarity as to what their last message means. And then I do think it might be worthy to have a conversation with Reflex just to let them know we took the next steps as we had agreed with Reflex, and hit we'll call it a stumbling block or a hurdle here, and see what thoughts, ideas that he might have in some of the items you just raised, Brandy. Can we go up? Can we go south? Yeah, we did talk about that with him last time, but I don't know how far that's been vetted. So,
Yeah, I think that was an issue of the property cost at that time was exorbitant.
and they didn't want to move, it didn't sound like, so.
But it might be worth exploring that at this time
Yeah,
too.
right.
I don't know if,
I think that, to stay in the EDA's lane, again, our role is, business retention, and the last thing I think we'd want to see is a business like Reflex have to make a difficult decision to pick up and move outside of town because there was no solution for them in the city of North St. Paul. So try to gain clarity on the church's message, but I think re-engagement with Reflex to figure out what next steps might be from their perspective and how we can help is probably the right move. Okay. Is that enough direction for now?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, and we can get an EDA member or two to participate in that, if it's helpful.
With speaking with Reflex or with
With
the church?
Reflex.
Got it. Okay.
No, church is on you.
Got it.
Sorry. Okay. Next item, item B, update on meeting with Old National Bank. I'll throw out my comments. I was on the call along with Brandy, and I think Chris was on the call. He wasn't saying anything. He was,
Yeah, I was there.
okay, he was taking notes or something. I'm not sure. We met with, as I understood it, one of them was like the asset manager and one was a facility manager or something.
I think their titles were facility property manager and corporate facility manager.
Okay. They were vaguely familiar with the property. I don't think either of them had been here, but they were aware of it. It was a good discussion. We just kind of gave them an update and under the premise of, you know, hey, we've got this redevelopment master plan. We don't have a bullseye on you, but there's kind of a natural one considering, you know, you take up that whole corner and at some point there might need to be a conversation, and we just wanted to open the lines of, you know, dialogue. And so they were very open to that, appreciative of it. We talked about a few key things, you know, the Highway 120 and 36 interchange, and kind of explained to them that a lot of potential development is a little bit hesitant along that corridor until we understand what that plan is. We did talk about some possibilities of things that might occur and things that have been proposed there, just to kind of get them up to speed. They shared with us that they actually have a planned renovation coming for that facility. I think they said this year, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
It was either this year or next year. It was imminent, and so you know, we did talk to them about, well, as that's underway, if it involves civil efforts, you know, site work type stuff, you know, that we could be utilized as a point of contact, and you know, if they were trying to reorient their drive-through or do something with all of their excess parking, and you know, whatever it may be. So there was really no, you know, we didn't come out of there with any to-dos or any action items, but I think it was a good opportunity, and they appreciated having the dialogue. They were a little standoffish at first, but I think they eased into the conversation knowing that we were just checking in. So.
Yeah, they were really appreciative of the offer to have Carrie, for example, do some outreach on their behalf, like welcome basket, or not basket, but welcome informational stuff that might go to new residents in some of our apartment buildings. So just kind of, you know, welcome to the community.
So I don't know if there's any questions or comments on that, but I think I think it was a good effort, and we should probably continue to do that with other businesses that make sense to do it with. Okay. Item C, downtown green space. Tom, do you want to brief us on that? No, I'm just kidding. Brandy.
So Brian and I have been working with Ron, the Public Works Director, to get some more information on what it will cost to get this project accomplished. For our newer members, are you aware of what this is? I don't. Oh, did, okay. So the vacant site that's between Sidewinders and the tattoo parlor is proposed to be kind of cut in half. The side closest to Sepola would be repaved with parking, and then the side closest to 7th Avenue would be converted into a green space seating area with some picnic tables and maybe a spot for public art. So in getting our bids for that, it was a little bit more than we anticipated at about $120,000. And so at this point in time, we're just trying to get some understanding of what the next steps might be. Is there still a desire to participate financially in this project by this group, or are we going to go to council for the majority of the ask?
Where does the 120 come from?
From the bids that I attached.
Okay, so as I look at it, So the Shifsky quote had a tack-on charge, their base number for the paving work and base rock and all that, call it 64,000, and then 22,000 to do the green space area to do the removals and then place 6 inches of topsoil at 22. But that work, that same work, the removals and the topsoil, is part of the $33,000 from the landscape bid.
Okay.
So I as I see it, it looks to me like it's still kind of under 100. Unless I'm misreading something.
It's more likely that I misread the bids.
I'm gonna go with me. I used to do this for a living.
Yep. So we're looking at like 34,000 plus the 64,000.
There's still probably a little bit to do. You know, we got to get some power there and blah blah blah. That I don't see in any seeing this stuff. Is this and none of the, we can't utilize any public works efforts for this?
We can, but I don't know how much we can guarantee, just given the uncertainty of their workload over the summer. And
Yep.
but I think that whatever we could, we will attempt to. But just to be safe, it's best to go forward with a request from City Council that might include everything that we may need.
Well, I think it's an eyesore and we should do something with it. That's just my quick and broad opinion, but whoever would like to comment or provide thoughts on it.
I agree. I mean, it's an eyesore, and what we did down at the old City Hall site, I think that helped kind of beautify the downtown a little bit. Instead of looking at an empty lot with gravel on it, I think this kind of helps with aesthetics a little bit and could be part of the marketing tool to sell it.
I'm gonna recuse myself from this whole thing.
You lucky duck.
When I first learned of this several months ago, when our first meeting that we attended, wasn't this going to be a temporary? I mean, it's set up to be developed or future development. So I have a hard time understanding why we would put such great improvements into that property like green space when it's used as a parking lot right now. And it's a bad parking lot. It could certainly be paved and made look reasonable, and we need parking in the downtown. And in the meantime, it's still available for development if somebody comes along and says, hey, I want that space. So I'd be a little bit hesitant to spend too much money on it. And so I would say improve the parking lot so that it looks presentable and have it ready for development. That's my.
Joe, any thoughts?
I'm sure this has been discussed way before I've been privy to this group. I've been so fortunate to grow up in larger cities in North St. Paul where they've put a lot of green spaces in and extra parking. One of the things that I've noticed when this has taken place, you know, whether it's 5 years after the construction or whatever, it's never kept up. Do we have like a plan in place, just, you know, thinking outside, like, hey, if we do build this, you know, we're going to maintain the grass area. We're going to make sure the grass is growing. We're going to make sure that it's staying the way that we built it. Because one thing that, you know, when I'm driving around big city St. Paul and seeing all the spaces that, I mean, nothing's been maintained. And I don't want, we put the money into something like this. Let's make sure that we have the capability as a city, the staff, everything to keep this going. and make sure it looks nice. I'm sure that's probably something you guys have talked about, but that's what pops in my head. Like, hey, let's make sure that we have, if we're too busy as a city right now to put the resources in to help build this, do we have the resources to keep it going?
Yeah, I don't know that we've played that out fully. At least the chair's assumption was that if it got built, Public Works would add, or somebody would add it to their mowing schedule. But might be the wrong assumption, but
Just like the old City Hall site. A lot of time and effort was put into that, and it looked great after we did it, and it really softened the downtown. You know, those kind of efforts actually encourage somebody to come in, I think, to, improves the downtown.
yeah, it is. Chris, I agree. I mean, it's hard to spend, 10 grand, let alone 100 grand on something that is knowingly temporary. But, again, when we did it at the City Hall, or at the old City Hall site, it just, it felt a lot better than what it was being utilized for. It was snow storage and cars all over the place and with no rhyme or reason. And, people would actually drive through because the ramp was still there from the old fire station. They'd drive, through back to the alleyway. And, then we got it in and put sprinklers in and it did at least cleaned it up for a period of time. And then what we wanted happened. It got developed. And that's the same thing, in a perfect world, I guess it would get, developed before we had to put the money into it. But otherwise, is it a year from now or 10 years from now? And how long do we want to, keep looking at it? I don't hate the idea of entertaining just cleaning up that lot, but a bulk of that cost in here is kind of the paving side. So if we were to pave the whole thing, presumably it'd probably be more than what we're staring at now. I would also add that I think at the outset, the intent, we were talking about a $90,000 number roughly, we'll just say. It was kind of a, hey, we'll throw in half if we can get council. Council's going to be the only other side to be able to throw in. And then if we can get Public Works to do any of it, would hopefully offset some of those costs and it would be less than us putting 45 or so in. So that's where we were on the spectrum before. And kind of had collectively, we hadn't authorized the expenditure, but that's kind of what we collectively would be palatable for an EDA's contribution to something like this. Just to answer your question, Chris.
Where's the snow gonna go? Right now, they pile it right in the middle of that parking lot.
Not there, I hope.
Yeah.
Right.
We're gonna have to cart that out, move it out.
Right.
That'll have to happen. That'll have to happen even if it is just repaved. To keep that clear,
Right.
they'll have to remove that snow. And a lot of times that lot was used to temporarily dump the city main drag snow. and
Yeah, for sure.
dump it later, and I would imagine that would still be the case.
Where does the snow go now?
McKnight Field.
McKnight Field.
Still melting.
It's still there.
Yeah, so I don't,
Which we got a phone call from some parents saying you have to apologize to our kids because they can't play because it's still wet down there. So it's not an ideal place to put snow, but it's the only place we got.
So it's draining onto the fields?
Yeah, the one field, I forget the name of the field, they said. Legion, and then the other one too. Yeah. So, if we don't have an idea, we're gonna, especially when the Lilly Building, we're gonna have to start paying to have our snow removed out downtown to somewhere else to melt, probably, unless we continue that path, so it is a problem that way. And, as far as leaving, right now, is it, I tried to, when I drove by it, I looked, it is paved, it's just badly paved, correct? Pretty much, okay. Because I know we, one of the residents came up because he has a little gravel and he got tickets and he says, look around North St. Paul, everybody's parking around here on city lots on gravel. So we've had people acknowledging that too, about being ticketed because they have a little gravel in their parking lot and, the field, right across the street here has the same thing. So that's something we're
Yeah.
addressing as well.
which I Tom might be able to speak to this, but if I'm not mistaken, that's actually problematic with the MPCA in terms of having cars park on non-paved lots, on gravel lots. I ran into that on a project a couple years back, where you have X number of cars on there because of oil leakage and everything else. They don't permit it on a gravel lot. Now, maybe that is smaller than, than comes into concern with the MPCA, but I don't know. I just, again, we can do nothing. We can choose to do nothing. I think I would advocate, the only two groups within the city that can make this happen short of a angel donor would be the EDA and the city council. So short of just saying, well, we can't do anything, I would sure like to get a read, if we don't have one from the council, if there is a possibility for a contribution from the council to help pay for this.
Also,
And by help, I mean like 80% of it.
part of it too is we have to understand Public Works, what their schedule is like this summer. I know they had a lot of road work, a lot of other things, so what is reasonable for our group as far as making sure we're just not loading them up?
And I did speak with the Public Works Director, and they can make it work. Their biggest concern, unfortunately, was they don't know where the water shutoff is for that, so getting water to the sprinkler system, but it's doable. I think one thing that would be helpful on the city side is, do you have a number that you're willing to go to, just so we know what we're dealing with on our end when it comes to the expense, and me speaking with council members to dial in on that? Is it 40, 45?
Yeah, in our last, I'd have to check the record, and I think we can. At some point, the EDA, again, had taken a position of, we were willing, I want to say it was 45, 50 max. Is that, for those that were on the EDA at the time, does that sound right? Okay. Now, current EDA, how does that generally feel?
That feels fine. I mean, I'm in,
I mean, we can't pay for all of it.
right. That's my point is, I'm in all favor of doing something. Not doing anything doesn't seem a feasible solution to me. So whether it's we're paving the entire thing or we're doing this green space, doing something makes sense. Leaving it as is does not make sense. Because it's a bad parking lot, and it's an eyesore, a horrible eyesore.
Chris, any thoughts on the 45 to 50 range, or are you still at zero?
Well, I think it should be paved, definitely. I would find out what the site, find out what the whole thing project would be if it was all paved without.
Just all pay without green space?
Yeah.
Okay. So if
There are some options there that make it a little easier to do that job than to allow for green space, but maybe not. Maybe it's just double. I don't know.
yeah, we won't put Mr. Shipsky on the spot, but if staff could go back to Shipsky's and ask that question, see what that number looks like. Economy of scale, price per ton should go down, be great.
I've got their number if you need it.
Okay, so it's, unless I hear objection, it sounds like 45, 50, but we'd like to see what does it cost to just pave the whole thing and clean it up in that regard, as opposed to the green space and then have to worry about managing it.
Quick question as the mayor. I've never done a budget before. Where would something like this come out of as far as the city? Where does that come from as far as what group?
Any number of funds to be able to do that, as long as council approves it, we can make the finances work. Whether it's an enterprise fund or out of, streets, or there's ways to do it.
Okay, that's, I just want to see if there's anything special that had to happen for that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and should the council decide that they can't participate in that in '23, I guess I would follow that request with, can we see if we can get it in the CIP for '24? In which case, we're willing to contribute nothing.
I already have it as a draft item in the CIP.
You do? Okay, good.
In the on the off chance that this didn't happen as a council objective.
So staff direction clear, so price to pave the whole thing, and we're 45 to 50, couldn't go beyond that. If council can do the other half, we can run with this plan. And or the all paving plan, I guess an opinion from the council, what they like would be good too.
Well, do you not want to see it at this meeting again next month? Or what is, I guess, are you asking me to take the new bid to city council or are we bringing it back here?
It'd be nice to understand where the council sits before we get to the next meeting. So I would assume that can be done at a minimum at workshop and then just give us a generalized opinion.
So nothing for, option, nothing, all paved, green space paved is
Correct.
what we're looking at.
And we don't have a firm number, do we?
Well, it's,
I mean, it's ballpark.
I mean, those
Based
are,
upon,
those
you
are,
know,
those are,
this-
those are quotes. I mean, at least from what I read, unless I didn't, I mean, those were hard quotes to do that work. I think we just need to separate a little bit of the scope, and we're gonna have to figure out a way to wire the sprinklers and where that electrical's coming from and stuff, but. Well, I think anything the city staff does, it costs them time and labor dollars or whatever, but would be deductive to what we're staring at. Because right now, this is essentially, we're farming the whole thing out.
Correct, that's what we're looking at right now.
That's how I see it, which wasn't the intent out of the gate. Okay, perfect. Anything else? We beat that horse enough? Tom, sure you don't want to say anything?
No, nothing.
I got to see it, I'm recused on this.
Okay, we got a boogie here. Treasurer's report.
I did a little different format for you this month. Just seemed a little bit easier for me to understand what's coming in and what's going out. As far as the expenses, I need to get a better understanding from the finance department what exactly all these line items are, other than like the contractual services for $51 in February and March. Those are just our attorney fees for a couple of items. I need to get some better understanding of what the AP pending due to pool, what that means, and what the transfer was, and the contractual services. So I'll report on that next month. But where we stand at ending fund balance at today's meeting, or at the end of April, is $415,188.86.
Perfect. And if you can figure out what all those little charges are.
That's what I'm saying. Yep. Yeah, that could have been. I need.
Authorized spending up to $2,500 for concept to look at.
We have an accountant on the EDA now. Thank you.
We've had all these lines in the budget for years that just leave us scratching our head. Inter-budget transfer. What is that? Well, you got to pay for your share of the lights. They tell us. Okay. Any question on the treasurer's report? We have way more clarity than we have in the past, so thank you very much.
It'll hopefully get better. I'm
Still looking for that.
not an accountant, and I really struggle with this kind of stuff. But
Still looking for those levy deposits, Mr. Mayor.
I
We'll take
told
those.
you it's going to be in July.
I know, July.
I do have a number of updates when we get to this update portion of the meeting.
Unless anybody has any items on treasury report, we are on updates. Go ahead, Brandy.
Okay, I'll start with what I have. So first, at the last meeting, we talked about how to advertise the EDA to the businesses in the community, and Chris drafted up a little blurb. Carrie took that and modified it a little bit and put it out into our newsletter. So we can do that periodically, just to let businesses and residents know that we're here and we can help. We have had some interest in the property that the city owns at the corner of 17th Avenue and Delaware. and so they were varying prices that they were willing, or sales contracts that they were willing to participate with. So we prepared an RFP and sent it out to those specific developers that had contacted us directly and gave them a deadline of May 31st, and we've received one back so far, but I would imagine we'll get something from all three of them. We, as staff, continue to work with Jim Lavelle related to the Lilly Building development. There's some hurdles with financing, but we're trying to work through those. We have a meeting with them tomorrow to get a project update, but we still anticipate that will happen yet this year. The parade that we talked about last month, that Carrie presented on, that'll be returned again next month. We're still waiting to hear from the city attorney on whether or not the EDA can be a participating sponsor with that event. The bylaws were looked at last month. Chris took a stab at trying to update those based on the, consistency with state statutes. It's going to take a little bit more work for staff, so we'll bring that back either in June or July. We also talked about facade improvement program. That was a program that was in existence a number of years ago, and we had a meeting with the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers, MCCD. We had an agreement back in 2013 with that organization, and that was partially how we were able to fund that facade improvement program. So we're looking into understanding how that worked back then and if it can be replicated today. And we've also invited the agency MCCD to come in and do a presentation on how they can benefit and coordinate with this group for businesses in North St. Paul. So they'll come in July and maybe August to do that presentation. Update on the community center. Wold Architects has continued to do their work. They've been meeting with a bunch of business owners, nonprofit groups, the school district, Ramsey County Public Library, to get their feedback on what the future of that building might be. And so they're in the process of consolidating and compiling that information, and they will provide a report to us. And we'll do, beyond that, I think that they're probably going to have a council presentation here in the next month or so. So that will be forthcoming. Staff has also been in the process of renegotiating a short-term lease with Kokoro so that they might stay a little bit beyond their June 30th lease deadline. So we've reached a preliminary agreement with them for like at least a 2-month extension. So that'll be coming to council too. I also have a meeting with Mario Gonzalez Mitchell, and he may want to possibly lease a space within that building too. So I'm going to talk with him on Friday. Cal's Pizza, I don't have any update on where we are with that lease option over it across the street. So I need to take some time and see if Tracy Luther or Cal has any updates on that option to lease the building across the street. And finally, I had a call and an email from a person named John Young with Forte Real Estate Partners. He has a client that's looking for a 5 to 10 acre site to build a 75 to 150 square foot industrial building for Jorgensen Construction. And I don't know where we might have such a site, but I thought I would ask you if there were any business owners or property owners in town that might be itching to.
Yeah, we don't have that kind of.
Okay. Well, with that is all I have for updates, unless you have questions for me.
Have you, so I noticed the old Tap and Grill site has been cleaned up and it looks really nice over there. What, are they getting to be pad ready to go up for sale, or are they?
No, that was an enforcement issue, so they're moving on something that was initiated last year.
Yeah, at least, yeah. And I tell you what, that looks much better for a left turn into that property now. It just, to me, it makes a lot of sense.
That's also been added to the CIP as an option, so we'll see where that goes.
Perfect. Before we go into closed session, anything else from any commission members? Nope. Next month's meeting is on the 13th of June, that's what I have.
Oh, yes, that is correct. And I will not be there, unfortunately, but Chris and Brian will handle it all.
Okay, I know Terry will not be here. Anybody else aware? I was just. Because you don't want to be, or? Or,
Are you suggesting we reschedule maybe?
well, I'm looking at, as I'm looking just at the calendar and our agenda and the things that we'll have to follow up, I'm not sure we have anything that is super time critical, and with the absences that I know we will have, is there any objection to skipping our June meeting?
I know Tom will be.
No objection.
Staff, any issue with that? I would suggest if there's guidance that's required along the way, please reach out and we can try to provide that guidance, short of anything that would require, gathering a quorum.
Sounds good.
Does that make sense? Okay.
We
Perfect.
will cancel that. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll cancel next month, and then we'll see everybody that's here in July, which I think you will not be.
He'll be gone.
Right, going camping? 3-month camping trip? Perfect. Okay, anything else to add before we go to closed session? If not, we'll go, when we go into closed session, we'll then just adjourn from closed session so we can let the guy in the booth go, since he's only got 3 minutes left on payroll anyways. Okay, perfect. The meeting will be closed as permitted by Section 13D.05 Subdivision 3C, Minnesota statute, to discuss a potential purchase of land located at, the property identification number is 132-922-110081.